Now that we have a basic tuning workflow under our belts, let's talk a little bit more about the Auto-Tune interface and some of the common controls that we'll find here at the top of the plugin. Now, Auto-Tune can work in one of two modes: auto mode, which is the default, or graphic mode. We'll talk about graphic mode a little bit later in this course. Now, either mode will use the same common controls up top here, which include the input type. This is how I tell Auto-Tune the kind of signal that I'm working with. Now, typically a vocal is going to either be alto, tenor, or soprano. However, if you're using, let's say, a bass instrument and you need Auto-Tune to look lower for incoming notes, you would choose the bass instrument option here. Now, the tracking control can generally be left alone. The Auto-Tune engine is very good at detecting incoming pitch. However, if you're working with a live performance or a performance that's very noisy, you might try playing with the tracking to a more relaxed setting. This relaxes its detection of periodic material. However, like I said, 99% of the time, you're going to leave it at that 50 setting right there. If you're working with a stereo signal, you'll either be able to use the left side or the right side as the pitch reference, as selected right here. There is a low latency mode that allows us to use Auto-Tune while tracking so that the vocalist can hear themselves being tuned in real time without a significant amount of latency. We have the scale here where we can choose key and one of many scales. And you'll notice when I choose a scale, that shows up below here. And these controls allow me to either remove notes from the scale so that Auto-Tune will not target those notes, or bypass them. So it'll still listen for those notes, but let's say if I bypass the A, it's not going to retune any notes that it detects on or around the A. Whereas if I remove the A, it's simply going to skip that, and it's either going to move me to the G or the B. And you'll notice as I change the scale, the notes below will change. Now, again, it's very important that we pick the correct target scale so that we tell Auto-Tune where we're trying to hit with our performance. If we simply just choose chromatic, unless the performance is nearly on pitch, what's going to happen is, let's say you're trying to hit an A, but you're closer to an A sharp, it's going to pull it to that A sharp, and that might not even be in your song or part of the melody. So it's a lot easier to get good results if you're actually choosing a specific scale, mostly major or minor. Now, we also have a scale detune setting that I can set up if I'm in 430 or let's say 435, or if I'm working to a detuned piano recording or an out of tune recording, I can adjust this in Sense here. I have a transpose option that goes up an octave in either direction that will transpose the entire performance. So if I just listen here. Do, re, mi, fa. Can be an interesting effect. As well as a throat length and formant control. The throat length control only comes on when the formant is checked. And we'll discuss those in a little bit more depth a bit later in the course. Now, there's also an options button that you can access here from the common controls. And inside here, you'll be able to set some basic key commands as relates to graphic mode, as well as control your buffer size. This is probably the most commonly edited parameter here in the options. If you're working on a really long piece of music, the default buffer of 240 might be too low, not enough memory. What you can do is just bump that up until it works with the length of piece that you're working on. And it'll let you know that. If you're working in graphic mode, it'll throw up an error that says, hey, we've exceeded the buffer. And you can just increase this number until that error goes away. So those common controls are going to work no matter whether we're working in auto mode or graphic mode here. And they're generally pretty much set and forget once you get the hang of using them. Again, with the input type and the key and scale being the most common controls that you'll access here.